So again, keep the tube map in mind that a company needs to master all of that, more or less, if you're going to do Agile and then scale Agile. You're going to have to be able to master that. And then from that picture, the leadership box in that upper right-hand corner, here's many of the pieces that you're going to need. And I'm not going to say it's all the pieces, but it's a pretty good shot at getting almost everything. And this is the first round, and we wanted to be able to share this with you. These are the 17 areas that you're going to have to look at. The first one is roles. The second one is coming up the AHA curve and how to transform individuals, teams, products, programs, processes, later portfolios, and then the entire organization. We're going to look at vision, strategy, people, and tasks, the VSPT model in all four. We're going to look at cascading vision. We're going to look at the Stacy diagram, and you'll notice that it's two colors there. The brown one, that is the traditional Stacy that they teach in almost every Agile and or Scrum course. Now, in Europe, I've noticed they use Cynefin, and or it's spelled Cynefin, but it's said Cynefin. It's a Scottish word, and Dave Snowden from IBM had come up with that one, and that one is also a 4-box, so you could just substitute that in. In certain situations, I see the value of communicating that way. I was taught the Stacy diagrams, and the two blue ones on the right there, that is my quote-unquote adaptation of the Stacy diagram to anticipatory vision, and we'll talk about that as well. The next box down there is culture, and all the elements of culture going from abstract vision down to more concrete goals and objectives that can be measured, and all of the parts that sort of belong there. It's not, some people would argue purpose should be first. Start with why. Simon Sinek style. We'll talk about that. Also included is the 4R model, and that's individual and how we work with individuals. And individuals obviously are in all 4 boxes of the transformation 4-box. The 4D model, define, distill, deliver, drive, and both of those, the 4R and the 4D model, have vision at the center. We'll talk about that and how to apply those in all 4 boxes. The next one is the flow friction analysis, and that has proven to be extremely powerful. There are videos out there. If we have another video set of why use flow, so if you haven't seen that one, you'll want to go take a look at that. That's about 3 hours worth of materials, 1 hour of myself doing a presentation like this, plus 2-hour-long interviews, one with Jay Keller and one with Jeff Kissinger. And Jeff, in his interview, explains the power of the flow friction analysis and how he uses that almost daily to help calm down the chaos and noise of the organization. In the next box, we have what we call the 4 whys. It really comes from value forward selling, Paul DeModica, and it was originally just 3 things that the companies would do. Any project or any product, the reason behind it would be to make money, save costs, get rid of or eliminate risk. By the way, product includes product, actual physical product, service, and results. So when I'm talking about product, it always includes those 3 things, and I'll mention that again when we get into that slide. The next slide is the almost 2 different hats that every enterprise level Agilist needs to wear. They need to be able to wear the Agile coaching hat there on the left and work with innovation and things like anticipatory vision and seeing what's over the horizon. And then there on the right, they have to wear a management consulting hat that deals with operational excellence, and we'll get into that. The next box has 3 of the 4 models. Upper right left corner is the 4R model, In the team and product boxes is the 4D model, and up there at the organizational level, down there in the right-hand corner, is the two hats that we wear as an enterprise agile coach. Later we get into how to achieve flow and some of the things that would show if you're just sort of stumbling around or if you're actually in a situation of anti-flow. The next box down with the little post-it notes there, that is stakeholder management, and the way that we do stakeholder management is much different than the way other people do stakeholder management. And we have found that when you're doing organizational transformation, it's really important to develop what we call critical mass, and it's almost like doing an internal marketing campaign, or you could even almost think about it as a political campaign where you're trying to get someone elected. And we'll go a little bit more into that when we get to that section. The next part is measuring the team. And the picture, the spider graph that we have there is a radar that we put together for a specific hybrid project management model that was an agile project management model, and they had their 7 principles, and we could measure the team against the organization to see where the gaps were. And for this particular team, it's sort of hard to read that one. We'll look at that when we get there, but they were not being supported enough in the principle that was up there at the top in that graph. In the next picture, you'll also see what we call the aha curve, and that was from the first or the second tile way over at the left. Here's how we start to actually measure that. And we can give teams a snapshot over time if they're actually working their way up the aha curve. And if they aren't, then we can try to help them and support them to find out the root cause using 5 whys, using the 4R model in reverse, using the 4D model in reverse. There are multiple different ways within the flow framework to try to smoke out what's going on and why is this team not making their way up the curve. And so this is a real life example, and I wanted to share that one as a way to measure. And this last one, so these last 3 that we've been talking about, it all starts to get into governance. How are we going to report back to the leadership? Let's say that the leadership had, okay, we're going to reinvent leadership. Well, how do you measure that? Well, there, 2 of these boxes would go directly to that. You would measure it with a spider graph for the executives themselves. You might do use it in a 360 methodology where you're having the people reporting to those executives anonymously be able to score them in the 7 different areas that we had on this particular picture. And we could also have the teams score the executives on how far they think they're up the curve. And that would be very much an eye-opener to the executives. In other companies, we've actually gone in and done full surveys, and where we ended up with post-it notes in all 4 boxes. I may add that one eventually to this one because it's such a good visualization of what happens in most organizations, especially when the executives are not taking it seriously and are talking the talk, but they're not walking the talk, and they're refusing to model the behavior. This last one is examples of what I actually used when I was at Nature Publishing Group. Remember I mentioned in one of the previous slides about, hey, we threw out Microsoft Project Server and we did everything in Excel. And we'll go more into that on that particular slide. And then there's other things that we do. We do flow mappings. We've got flow in a nutshell. And there's also additional slides at the end of this one that have a few extra things. We may or may not include that in the recorded one. But for those that go through Flow Certified Professional, they will have access to these PowerPoints and PDFs. There are four lenses on transformation, and I hinted at those in the other slide. There's the individual area, there's the team area, product, and in product I include program, so all program management, uh, process management, including everything that the line managers do. Agile coaches will live in this box. Down in the team box, you're going to have the scrum masters in the team and or team level facilitators, depending on how you've set your agile up. Okay, and so those are the first three boxes. In the organization box, I include everything from portfolio management upward, including that along with directors, VPs, C-level, and so on. And so these are the four lenses through which I look at transformation. And by the way, you cannot do a transformation and only work in one or two of the boxes without touching the other two or three boxes. It's just impossible. So if anyone is out there and they think, well, I can just transform my teams at the team level and I'll just delegate it downwards and it will be great. If you're not transforming the behaviors, the mindsets, and the patterns in the other three boxes and you've only focused on team, you have just increased your risk for failure by multiple factors. So we're going to be using this pattern throughout the rest of this presentation. Now, when we're looking at tool sets and methods that we talked about in the beginning when we had that little T-shaped diagram with tool set on the left and mindset on the right, tool sets and methods, from what I've observed, everything from Scrum to hybrids of Agile that blend Scrum with whatever, including traditional classic project management. Those have primarily focused on the individual team areas and of course up into the product area because that's where their strength lies. And they only have the smallest of links to the organization. And so this is a way to help people understand why tool set versus mindset is so important. So on the next slide, we're going to look at what is mindset and transformation covering. In this slide, you can still see tool sets and methods in the background there. But mindset and transformation is in all four boxes. As I said, you cannot transform one area without touching the other three. And so for me, mindset and transformation is a much bigger topic. It requires much more effort, much more discipline to achieve that. And as I shared earlier, the product area includes programs and processes, and it would include roles like program manager, line manager, business owner, things like that. Down in the organization area, there in the right corner, it's going to include things like portfolio managers, senior and executive management, along with the C level. When we get into scaling Agile, almost all scaling methodologies, and I've got pictures of less up there and SAFe, but I don't remember which version of SAFe that is. The SAFe experts will recognize that immediately, whichever one it is. The point is, scaling Agile, for the most part, concentrates in the program corner up there with product. And it's a program level, program management methodology for doing Agile program management. So SAFe, less, Scrum at Scale, Nexus, whatever scaling methodology you're using. Again, scaling Agile, most of what I've seen out there is that they're taking a tool set view. They give you the structures. They try to talk about values and attitudes, and most of them are predicated on using Scrum. So, for example, SAFe is optimized for all of the teams that are doing the development in all of the multiple teams that they're working with. They call them release trains. All those teams working together on that, the ground or the base assumption is that all those teams are using Scrum. Now, they do allow for teams that are using Kanban or other Agile methodologies, but Scrum in the latest numbers is over 70% of all Agile. And those numbers have been pretty stable for the last 4 or 5 years. It goes from anywhere from 70 to 75%, depending on which year. But if it's predicated on doing Agile well at the team level, then that requires that the teams are not only doing Agile, but they're being Agile, that they're not just doing it as a tool set, they have achieved the mindset. And so that has to happen first before you start to scale. But a lot of organizations realize that they're way behind in the game. And so they're in a hurry to go from doing team level correctly and getting that part right. They're already rushing up into the program area up there in the product corner, upper right. And by doing that, they may choose a scaling methodology that in the end is not appropriate for their organization or culture. So there are really high risks when doing this, and in scaling Agile, which is primarily a tool set view, you also have to have at that level the correct mindset. And if that mindset's not being done correctly and getting into the entire organization, then you are going to have problems.